assistant coaches and bring them over. Leeds will be hoping that he's another one of those.
Yeah, and he has the added advantage to all the assistant coaches that he has actually been a head coach, just not at the top level yet.
Yeah.
But he's been around plenty of times seeing someone be head coaches at the top level. So I think it's clear that he probably wasn't their first choice. That's the thing to say. But that shouldn't necessarily influence anything. But will that put the pressure on if things don't go right? Does it kind of... Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out. I mean, shall we move on to what eventually we'll talk about being one of the first big decisions Rohan's had to make?
Well, he made this decision. That's one of the questions, I suppose.
Yeah, so the next big story that happened was Zach Hardaker leaving Wigan. So he's left Wigan with immediate effect, announced on Friday morning by the Warriors at 8 o'clock. If 8 o'clock's the time you announce, like, quote unquote bad news, then what is 6 o'clock for? When Leeds announced he'd signed him. But the 30-year-old has played 80 games for Wigan since joining in 2019, following the end of his doping ban that saw him ruin Castlefords' almost perfect season in 2017. The Pontefract-born player was recently stood down from the squad for Good Friday derby with St Helens after coach Matt Peet said he dipped below the standards expected of a Wigan player, and he has now been released, of course. And in a statement, Wigan's executive director Chris Radlinski said, Zach Hardaker is a hugely talented player, universally liked by teammates and staff. Everybody at Wigan Warriors has done everything they can to provide him with the platform he needed to shine at the highest level. As a consequence, we are all extremely disappointed that his time at the club has had to end in this way. We wish him all the best for the future. Let's cover this part of it off before we get to the news that was announced at 6 a.m. on Tuesday, as we record today. Always in Our Shadow said, how many chances does this man deserve? So much talent, so many fuck-ups. Who's going to be the next set of mugs to throw money at him? My bet is Fev.
Matt Speakman said he's always been solid for us when he's played, and he's probably our best centre, but culture has to come first. Reading between the lines, Radlinski's fuming. It's a shame because Wigan gave him so many chances, even after they resurrected his career, and he's repaid that with this. Massive talent, gone to waste. If I were Cass, I wouldn't go near him after he burned them last time.
And Tom Andrews said, slightly embarrassing, the two sets of fans wanting their team to sign him are the two he's previously fucked over. Desperation central in Cass and Leeds. I don't think Cass were ever seriously in for him, even though the fans seemed to want him. I think it was a two-horse race for where he would end up. We actually did a poll asking where he would end up. 26% of people were right. They went with Leeds. More on that in a minute. 38% said Fev, 10% said Cass, and 25% said the option which was other/the pub. One person did comment to say, can we have an option for prison? So that kind of though paints the picture of where Zach Hardaker sits in people's mindsets. And the key line was, for me, everybody at Wigan Warriors has done everything they could to provide him with the platform he needed to shine at the highest level. It's kind of suggesting that the reason he hasn't is Zach Hardaker's fault and Zach Hardaker's fault alone. And I have to have a bit of sympathy with the Wigan board with that kind of thing, because they did stick with him when they could have ripped up his contract pretty much straight away when he drove round the corner from the pub to save his golf clubs from being in a pub car park. They supported him when he was challenging the length of his ban. They certainly supported him by pushing him through rehab, which seemed like it was much needed at the time. They were very supportive with Zach Hardaker in his first year of the club, which form-wise was up and down, I think I would say. Fitness-wise, he wasn't quite where he needed to be, but they persisted. He then had a spell where actually he was earning the respect of people at the club because he had sorted himself out. It seemed like he wasn't a problem, he wasn't a troublemaker, although maybe Adrian Lamb's soft approach to the players might have been part of why it wasn't picked up if there was rumblings going on. But basically, he's gone and fucked that all over this year. He was a part of the senior player group. 30 years old, all the experience he's got. He's going to be one of your senior players. So he was part of the conversations at Wigan about setting the culture for this season, having a reset after what was a disappointing year last year. And he's gone and been given opportunities by the club to, they didn't have to let him move back to Yorkshire because his contract, they could have said you're in breach of contract, but they wanted the best for him. They didn't have to give him special leave not to travel back with the club after Wakefield because of spending time with his family, and guess what? He spent it in the pub instead, it seems like. He certainly was late for training, the next day, which he shouldn't have been. And then it sounds like, but this is obviously rumour and speculation that always surrounds Zach, it sounds like he kind of saw this as his jumping off point to get that deal moving back to Yorkshire that he wanted at the end of last year. So basically he thought, let's go to the pub a couple of nights at Easter and that'll make sure Wigan get rid of me. That's what it feels like happened. None of that's me speculating from the jumping off point of knowing what happened, that he didn't turn up for training on time after the Wakefield Cup game.
That I had heard, that he'd been late for training.
I've heard that from loads of sources now.
A lot of people were saying that was the case. So I mean, as you say, it would all be speculation, but it's not good. I mean, it's a shame because I do think, and he's not the first, and he won't be the last. He's a very talented player who, because of his attitude towards the game, hasn't made the best of his so far. Hasn't made the best of his talent, notwithstanding being a very good player. He still hasn't, I don't think, made the best of his talent. I think he could have. I think he could have been a lot more.
He doesn't. It feels like he hasn't learned to respect the privileged position he's been in, the opportunities he's been given. Even when you feel like he's starting to grow up, he clearly hasn't grown. What I would say about Zach Hardaker, he is a likeable guy. If you come across him, when I've come across him at club fan days, or just if I've been at the training ground and come across him, or what have you, and what everyone else has said as well, is a really, friendly, nice, polite guy who you can see that as well. Everyone gets on with him, but at the same time, there's a childish, irresponsible nature to Zach that unfortunately seems to carry too much weight in his choices. And that's a shame, I find, and I think that's a big part of what's happened here, unfortunately. And the stuff that's come out of Wigan, any interviews I've seen where it's been talked about, with it be Pete, there was one with Bateman as well. Everyone says they want the best for him. It seems like he's got some issues again, but maybe he isn't addressing them, and he's not going to address them now that he's just been picked up back where he's left off and got a contract at another Super League club within 3 days. Yeah.
There you go.
So I suppose the finishing part to this story then is that Leeds have re-signed England back, and former I'd say former England as well, by the way, because I don't think Sean Wayne, having been
not a chance
in the sort of, maybe not in the front row of what's happened at Wigan, but certainly being fully aware of his behaviour, will say no, mate.
Not a chance.
Until the end of the season they've signed him on a deal, so maybe Fev will be his eventual destination after the end of this season. 30-year-old who was released by Wigan last week scored 67 tries in 155 appearances for Leeds between 2011 and 2017, where he won 3 Grand Finals, 2 Challenge Cups, and was the 2015 Player of the Year at Leeds, as well as Man of Steel that year, of course. Gary Heverington said, "We had to move quickly. Unfortunately, we have suffered injuries to our backline with Liam Sutcliffe and Tom Briscoe, the latest to join that list during Friday night's win over Toulouse. Of course, recently single Richie Myler and Jack Walker and David Fuzzer, 2 of the big signings for this year, are all other players on that injury list, aren't they? in the back line for Leeds. He said centre and fullback in particular are areas where we have long-term injuries to Harry Newman and Jack Walker, and Zach will provide experienced cover in both these positions. Tom Andrews got in touch on this. He said, stinks of desperation, must be playing for peanuts too, because no one can convince me a Leeds Rhinos team isn't at or very close to the cap, despite how shit they are. It's very expensive shit. And Mark W said, what was it I said earlier about Leeds having too many liabilities? This can only end well.
Oh dear. There's one thing for sure. It's not boring, is it? It's interesting stuff.
It's injury cover, isn't it? I don't think Leeds would have been in the market for Zach Hardaker if they didn't have all these injuries. How they're going to get some of those injured players off the cap to fit Zach Hardaker in? We could be in for another Wigan trying to reduce the salary of Harrison Hansen mid-season situation here, couldn't we?
Yeah, because Tom's right. With some of the big signings they made, in the off-season, they've got to be edged up towards the cap. So, not quite sure how they're going to make this fit. Presumably, conversations already taking place with Super League, because otherwise they won't be able to register him.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, but Zach's value is lower than what it would have been. That's fair to say.
Oh, true. Yeah, very true. But still, he won't be playing for nothing, I wouldn't have thought.
No, and I do expect if Fev get promoted, then he will end up at Featherstone in 20.
That was my bet. Yeah, that was my bet.
Yeah. The Combies squad has been named. Let's cover that off. That's a lighter note than Zach Hardaker to move on to, isn't it?
Yeah, Ellery Hanley has named his first Combined Nations All-Star squad ahead of the mid-season game with England later this year. The All-Star side faced Sean Wayne's England on Saturday, June the 18th, at Warrington's Halliwell Jones. 9 players of Samoan heritage feature in the 29-man squad. 6 players from Tonga have also been named. Hanley also explained it's been agreed that no more than 6 players will be selected for the match across both sides from any one Super League club.
Yeah, that's why no Saints players have been picked to pull out. Yeah. So the squad that is announced is Jake Connor, who represents Hull FC and Trinidad, Kenny Edwards of Cass and New Zealand, Jay Field of Wigan and Australia, David Fafita of Wakefield and Tonga, Ben Garcia of Catalans and France, which is a weird one for me because France play Wales on the Sunday of that weekend, so that's a no-go. Pointless. Tom Johnston of Wakefield and Scotland or Germany, apparently his heritage lies with. Sam Cassiano of Catalans or Samoa. Sean Kenny Dowell, Hull KR and New Zealand, Tim Laffey of Salford and Samoa, Samisoni Lange of Catalans and Tonga, Ricky Latelli of Huddersfield and Samoa, Daniel Levi of Huddersfield and Samoa, Kane Lynette, who I think now, with the injury news that we'll get to when we're picking up the match reviews, it won't be available for this game now, but Hull KR and Scotland, hopefully is back for Scotland in the World Cup, Mason Lino of Wakefield and Samoa, Tuilola here of Huddersfield and Tonga, Joe Love Me Do from Hull FC and Fiji, Jake Mamo of Cass and Australia, Reece Martin of Leeds and PNG, Peter Matautia of Warrington and Samoa, Manu Mao of Hull FC and Tonga, Mitchell Pearce of Catalans and Australia, Matt Pryor of Leeds and Australia, Liggy Sow of Hull FC and Samoa, Chris Satai of Hull FC and Tonga, Ken Seo of Salford and Samoa, Kalepi Tanganoa of Wakefield and Tonga, Zane Tetavanu of Leeds Rhinos, Cook Islands / New Zealand / suspension. He won't he'll have got suspended again by then. Carl Tumavavi of Hull FC and Samoa, and Luke Yates of Huddersfield Giants and Australia. A couple of fan views on this. Mark. Sorry, yeah.
Well done, Mark. That's a very impressive readout there, mate. That's a lot of clubs and names.
We've got a couple of fan views. Do you want to share those?
I will. Joshua's granddad says, nice to see, unlike Wayne's Ellery's bus pass unlike Wayne, Ellery's bus pass covers Yorkshire too. 6 from FC, but actually hope that we take the Saints' view of this game and pull players out. And Tom Andrews says, not that I particularly want KR players playing in this pointless game, but how you leave Matt Parcell out is genuinely baffling. Nice to see Trouser Snake getting another cup for Trinidad. Another cap for Trinidad.
So both fan views that we've had basically say this game's a waste of time. So expect minimal attendance in Warrington for this game, based on that very small representation of the rugby league fan base. But I do look at the squad and think there's a couple of older players in that squad who won't be involved in the World Cup who might say, fuck this. And I'm looking at Pearce and Pryor as two names that if I were them, I'd be thinking, fuck this. Yeah. But if I was Samoa, Tonga, in fact, especially Tonga, because the game is raising money through